there's so much that just comes from not really thinking about it, just blurting it out or saying it, and then it sticks, and then it gets its own little trajectory.
This is Synchronicity.
This is Synchronicity.
This is Synchronicity.
This is Synchronicity.
This is Synchronicity. This is Synchronicity.
Welcome to episode 73 of Synchronicity. My guest this week, I'm going to put in a drum roll here, Tim Heidecker, from everything that I have liked and loved that I found funny over the past, I don't know, however many years, decade or so. You know Tim from things like Awesome Show, Great Job with Eric Wareheim, Bedtime Stories, That's with Eric, $1 Billion Movie, Steve Brule character with John C. Reilly, his production company, absolutely. Nathan Fielder has come out of there, right? Jesus, man. Eric Andre, Doug Lussenhop. As many people as you can imagine who are awesome, Tim has worked with. Also, I had heard from his friends, Jay Weingarten, Mikey, Vic, all people who know Tim in some capacity or another, have just attested to the fact that he was one of the nicest people that they have come across. That's pretty cool because all of those people, I've gotten to know them, are also some of the coolest and nicest people. So we follow the chain, right? Tim I'm so gracious to do this interview. You'll hear me express my gratitude throughout this intro and the episode because it really was Vic Berger hooked this up, and I'm so glad that he did because it was fun to just have a conversation with someone I really admire, and to hear also his perspectives on things like collaborating with other people, because I think he does an excellent job of that, and I think that's a really cool thing to be good at and work with such amazing and talented people. We also talk about On Cinema season 9, which is going on now. So I'm going to give a little bit of a breakdown of what On Cinema is. You'll hear us reference it at some point in this podcast. So On Cinema is a show, a movie review show that Tim does with Greg Turkington. Basically, in character, they have this alternate world where Tim is a huge asshole, always trying to kind of like push his projects and what's going on, and Greg is kind of like a lonely loserish movie nerd, and it's just one of the funniest dynamics that I've seen emerge over, it's hard to believe, 9 seasons at this point. But if you haven't checked that out, go check it out from the beginning. Adult Swim features it. It's on YouTube. It's all of the places. I'm going to have links, FYI. Everything you hear me talk about, I'm basically putting together like a best of Tim Heidecker project page for this episode. That's going to be at syncpodcast, syncpodcast.com/Tim. I'm also, if this is more phonetically pleasing to you, mindpodnetwork.com/Tim. Those will both take you to everything I'm referencing here in this episode, or in this intro rather. So definitely check out On Cinema. We talk about that. We talk a little politics in here. It was just nice to hear his perspective and just how he comes up with comedy. You heard in the little intro, a lot of this does have to do with intuition, and just kind of, really coming from a place of just what makes him and his friends laugh and trying to get that out in its purest form. And I think that's really a testament to kind of the idea that everything you put into anything, whether it's comedy, writing, music, whatever it is, that shines through in the final product. It's everything cumulative from that process that's actually being shared with people, and I think that's cool. So I anticipated a cool and fun conversation, and that's what we had. That's it. I'm not even going to plug anything in the beginning of this because why would I do that? Besides, unless you wanted to subscribe, rate, and review after the show. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, you can still review it, but 1 star if you want. But please, that would be cool if you could do that if you like the show. Massive thanks to Tim. Thank you to Vic. And without further ado, here is Tim Heidecker. Hey,
Hello?
Tim. How you doing?
Good. How are you? Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you. I'm going to turn off my video.
Yeah.
Okay,
There's no
cool.
reason for us to look at each
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, man, for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. No. Yeah. It's no problem. I don't really know. Tell me a little bit about yourself. I'm not sure. I just don't know who you are.
Yeah, no. I am a person who I have a podcast network, which is basically, it's not spiritual per se, but we talk about, things that we think people want to hear about. So like dealing with stress, anxiety, anger, fucked up shit in the world, death, all that stuff. But we're trying to do it in a way that's not like very heavy and like religious and dogmatic. So that's kind of what I'm doing right now. I've been a big fan of yours for a long time, but I got tuned into Vic a very long time ago, and Vic and I went to the same school, college, Berkeley.
Oh, okay.
And so that's how I'm just super grateful for him for hooking this up. And yeah, I don't really know exactly.
How old are you? And you live in New York, and you're Vic's age.
Yeah, I'm Vic's age. I'm 33. I just had my first child about 10 months ago. Yeah.
10 months ago, you said?
Yeah, he's 10 months on the 9th. So yeah, it's pretty nuts. And I know you just had a boy too, so in October. So congrats on that. It's pretty awesome. So yeah, I'm just I really don't know what to say about myself to you. But,
that's good enough.
Okay, cool.
Shouldn't have much to say by this at that age. I think 33. You should be like, well, I don't have much to say for myself yet.
That is pretty much my stance. I definitely am going to be more of a listening and finding out things for the next however long. So yeah. And in terms of the podcast, basically, it's just, it's a conversation. I use it as an opportunity to talk to cool people who I admire and look up to and I think are doing cool stuff. There's no overt theme to it. When Vic came on, both times we were talking about politics a lot, obviously. But, it's pretty free form, and really I just use it to find out about cool people.
And your my levels are good for you and everything?
Yeah, you sound pretty good. I don't hear any feedback or anything, so I assume it's just coming in from computer speakers. So it sounds good.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, you're good. Cool, man. Well, I guess we'll just get started.
Sure.
Thank you so much for coming on. As I was doing my like cursory research for this, it just dawned on me like how much you actually do. It's like kind of insane. It was just like
let's go through it.
Yeah, I was listening through. I mean, I'd like to start with On Cinema, but I also want to point out something else before we get into it, which is this is going to seem like a roundabout way to do this, but I'm a big Stevie Wonder fan. And as I've gotten like more, if I've been privileged to meet people who know Stevie Wonder, I got like confirmation that he's like an excellent, excellent human being. And as I've met people who know you personally, I've also found that out. So it's just like, it's always encouraging and inspiring to see people who are doing stuff that I love and respect out in the world, but also are like very nice people too. I think I just wanted to point that out, and I'm super happy.
That's nice to hear.
Yeah, man.
A few years ago, or I don't know how, probably several years now, I started to notice a trend on message boards and stuff, people talking about me, and there was this perception that I was this big dick, like I was this bad asshole. And I think that's just a lot of people taking a lot of my personas that I put out there as at face value. And, even in the live Tim and Eric shows, I come out and I'm just brutal. And so that perception kind of just started to take hold, I think, and there was just this assumption that was kind of really who I was, which I get, but then I like, every personal encounter I've had, almost that I can recall. I can't recall one that was not, but if you would meet me after a show or on the street or something, I always, and maybe it was too much, I go out of the way to be polite and friendly and respectful. So I'm like, when is that going to start trickling into that?
Well, we're gonna get it out in this podcast because I truthfully, I mean, it's weird. I mean, I get obviously like you do why people would think that some of the personas you put on, you know, a lot of them from the stuff you put out is very kind of like an acerbic, combative type of guy. But what's weird, why people I think would actually think that is like there's another element to the stuff and a lot of the people you work with, the stuff that you put out, that it's like there's something very like pure and genuine about it too. So even if it is kind of like a persona being nasty, there's some like poking fun element to that too, which it would be weird to me that people didn't see. But you know, when you're dealing with like reaching millions of people, you know, everyone's going to react in a different way. So it's understandable, but yeah, I get it, man. So, all right, let's start with On Cinema, because today is a brand new season, season 9. I've eagerly been anticipating it. And I wanted to bring up that I had forgotten this, but I remember listening when it was just a podcast, and it was just kind of like a spoof of like podcasters, you know, it was kind of silly, like making fun of movie stuff, but it's evolved into this, which is kind of a common theme in a lot of stuff you work with, this whole alternate reality of like you as a character and Greg Turkington as a character that is really just like one of the funniest things that I tune into on a regular basis. But what I wanted to specifically talk about it is another thing you seem to be amazing at is, and I really admire this, is you work really well with other people, and you kind of bring out this like alchemy and this energy from whoever you're working with that just makes it like an overall amazing thing. So I was wondering, like, have you always been good at working with other people?
Have I? Well, I've always found, yes. I mean, I think collaborative creation is at the heart of what I do. It's there are more solitary things I do, but I also have always been in bands and have always used. I mean, I guess one way to think about it is the friendships I generally make tend to be with other creative people, and the way we enjoy spending our time together might be in making stuff a lot of the time. That's at least where some of that starts, you know? Yeah. And I don't know how else they're just, I mean, there's not, the people I get to do that with also happen to be some of the best at it as well. Yeah. In my opinion. There's nobody more like forward thinking and creative and passionate about stuff than Eric. Greg is one of the most naturally funny, like just in general in life, people I've ever met, and I get to work with John C. Reilly, who's just this font of unbelievable talent, and the list goes on. But I think I tend to be good at I have a pretty good work ethic, and I tend to be around people that might not have the best work ethic, so I'm providing a little bit of an engine there sometimes, and so that it's often a good mix of I like a lot of I try to treat everything a little seriously and try to see things through, and that that helps when that's encouraging to another person to work with me. Right. That's helpful to them.
No, I mean, that's interesting to hear because, you asked me at the beginning what I did. I went to a music college. I've generally hung out with, and a lot of my friends are very creative people. And there is something that seems to be an element in a lot of creative people is this kind of, it's hard to get consistent for a lot of people to turn it into something that they can finish and a project and even have it be related to money. And somehow it's something that a lot of creatives aren't interested in, which is a shame because it seems like as time goes on, especially with the internet, it's becoming more important to like actually develop those habits. And I mean, I'm not surprised to hear it from you because like I said, man, I was just, I've engaged with probably like 80-90% of the stuff you put out, even the small little things, but it's just astounding to see it all listed out and like how prolific you are in this stuff. Like, is this just like something that's been in you since like so was your first kind of creative endeavor being in bands?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, aside from making little plays and puppet shows and stuff in the basement, Yeah, I mean, in high school, there was a few bands floating around, and we gave it our best shot. But then I think I recall a very distinct moment of wanting to be an actor and being involved in the local theater a lot and doing a lot of plays and stuff. And expecting there was a feeling that I was going to go on to some kind of theatrical school or was going to pursue theater basically, or acting. And I didn't get it. There was a program in high school that was like a summer program that I didn't get into. That was very disappointing, and it was kind of assumed that I was going to get into it. And that was really upsetting. And at the same time, I was discovering like Woody Allen. I was discovering, the movies from the 60s and 70s, and I was really getting into film. I felt like maybe the smart thing to do would be to, like Woody Allen did, was to just make your own stuff and then I could put myself in my own work, and I could make, I could get into the business that way. And it did seem a little practical to, I really did have these I did have this discussion with my parents and everything. It was like, I could learn a trade at least. I could learn, something that had like, a potential career, as opposed to acting, which seemed much more flimsy and unstable. So that put me in the mind to go to film school, which still is a place without a lot of potential, but it was my plan at the time.
Right, and you were like learning something, going and doing it. So like, how did that going to film? Did you meet Eric at film school? When did you meet Eric?
Yes. Freshman year, we were on the same floor, same dorm. And, we were in the same classes. About four of us were all kind of experiencing this for the first time together.
That's cool. Yeah. So how did that evolve into? Because I know the famed story of you sending some stuff to Bob Odenkirk, who is another, just amazing. Also hear the stories about him, just such an incredibly nice person. How did that evolve? Like, you guys were making something and you were just like, we're going to mail it to this guy because we like what he does?
Well, yeah, I mean, it evolved slowly over 4 years of college together, kind of getting partnered up and making little proto Tim and Eric style videos, and very, very organically, without a real vision for what it was supposed to be. It was just kind of going in the direction that felt funny to us, or felt. I don't know. There wasn't a real sense of comedy back then to us. It was just like making stuff and making weird stuff, making artsy stuff, I guess. And so we were all like, if we weren't in a band, we were doing an art gallery, like, making installation stuff or videos. And that was, Philadelphia art, living in the city and being around other musicians and artists. And there wasn't like a career trajectory really yet. Just like going to see bands and going to art galleries, and but we would also we would drink some malt liquor and make prank phone calls.
Yes, totally.
And film that, and then we'd film weird videos in the middle of the night that were just like weird, us wearing Halloween masks and jumping around the room, and just. We would just make stuff and make a lot of prank phone calls. That was a lot of energy spent there. And after college, I went to New York, and I kind of had gotten back into trying to. I was like, well, I worked on some film crews after film school, and was pretty disheartened by that, because. As anybody can tell you, working on a low rung of a film crew after a few months for me was like, this isn't what I want to do. I don't want to run to Walmart and buy rollerblades at 6 a.m. For some romantic comedy, and I just, it was hard work, and I wasn't very good at it. I wasn't a good worker, I wasn't like a good employee. So I moved to New York because I had done a few plays in Philadelphia, and I thought, well, a few friends had moved there, and it felt like I would try to restart that thing where I was maybe get it back into acting and
Right.
Writing and going and doing. I was like, I'm going to try to do stand up. Like it was like, let me try to get this creative thing going, and it's all my angles in Philadelphia have been kind of played out.
Right.
So I was in New York and Eric was in Philly, and he had gotten a little cottage industry doing like wedding photography and wedding videography and that kind of stuff. So he had a little thing going, but we would talk and instant message each other and trade ideas and stuff. And we had, so we, as friends, we'd get together and make stuff on the weekend. And that kind of started forming into a little bit of there was a theme or kind of a consistency to it that then evolved into something more serious.
Well, man, I there's a few things also that I pulled out of. You had an awesome conversation with my buddy Duncan the last time you were on his podcast, where we got to kind of see some more of like your inner workings of how this stuff worked. And you were brought up a story about Steve Martin and his early stuff and how he was talking about something that clicked for you, which was the stuff that you were working on was really trying to take, like when you're with your friends and you're laughing and you're being silly, like maybe you had a drink, maybe you smoked something, but it was something that was like silly and personal. And what's so interesting about this to me is that shines through in almost every single thing you're a part of with the people you're working with. And it also, like I said, it adds their little twists and elements too. Like, could you talk a little bit about kind of the genesis? Like you also mentioned that, the two themes I also see in your stuff is like instinct and collaboration. That's like kind of a general framework for what you're doing. Could you talk a little bit just like how do you approach a project that you think you want to work on with someone, or you have an idea? Like what's the process for you? And I'm sure each one is a little bit different, but what's that like for you?
Yes, it is different in each one. I think there's not a lot of conscious thought. I think there's a little bit of gut and instinct, and the one way is like lots of ideas percolate, and some stick around longer. And I think the ones that the more you talk to other people about and the ones that you're most excited about generally have the best chance of success. I guess I can just talk about on cinema and the way that slowly bubbled and like the one thing that was very clear about that was always that it was something that we just loved to do. And because we were able to do it as a podcast for so long, it was almost free to do. It was almost no costs involved. So we could let it if we were out at a bar, we could go in the corner and record something on our phone. And it got a little more serious, and we would just get together in my garage and do a bunch. And it so slowly and organically bubbled itself up that when we did the first season for Thing X, I guess it was this guy Joe Randazzo, who used to run The Onion, who was given a bunch of money from Turner to make a website. And for one of the first things he did was like say, you should turn that podcast into a show. And we kind of figured out what that would be. And then we made one, and it was just satisfying. And it just, I don't know, it just became a total blank canvas to do anything you wanted with. But it had a narrative, or it had an episodic
structure to it, right?
Structure and engine that we really early realized like, we can make these for the rest of our life if we wanted to, because there's always going to be a movie coming out to talk about, and so that was exciting. And the more we, it was also like almost like writing a book or something, because you could, or a cartoon or something, because anything in that world could happen, because all you had to do was talk about it.
Right, and then it's a thing, yeah.
Then it became a thing. You didn't have to go to Jackson Hole. You didn't have to shoot anything in Jackson Hole. You just had to talk about it, and the audience could do their own imagination about what that was like. So Yeah, I mean,
And then from there, you also like evolve. Like, did Decker come specifically out of On Cinema and like some of
yeah,
these other characters? They just like it took on a life of its own too, which is amazing.
yeah, and sorry, I'm eating.
That's okay.
There's so much that just comes from not really thinking about it, just blurting it out or saying it, and then it sticks, and then it gets its own little trajectory.
Right.
So Decker became a bragging, like a little story point in On Cinema that I was going to make my own. I could do better than all these movies. You know,
Right.
It was just a thing to brag about. I think we were talking about it before it even existed.
Yeah. I think that.
Or we had shot like a little scene. But, you know, I was watching one of those old Peter Sellers Pink Panther movies the other day. It was on TV, and I was like, I saw the connection. I saw what like Mike Lazo at Adult Swim saw as soon as he saw us playing around with his Decker character. It was like,
Right.
That's just like an easy thing to translate into another show. Like, I would say Pink Panther because, you see him in that trench coat and the mustache and the hat. You're like, it's like, just like with the black suit and
Sunglasses.
Here, it's just half your work is done because you've got this thing to build around.
Well, and so the other thing, speaking of Decker too, like it starts to merge, and this is another really cool thing that I think a lot of the work that you do does is it kind of, it's like our reality that we live in and engage with every day, but it's just, this is one of the reasons I love Vic stuff so much. It's just tweaked 5% or 10% in a weirder direction, or a layer is peeled off. So like a lot of the things you were doing for Decker were like, this is before Trump was elected, but like, it was like a clear parody of some of the ways he's acting with like the pursed lips and stuff. So like, do you have like a particular angle when you're doing this stuff, or is it really just kind of like free form, whatever is going to make us laugh? Maybe we can weave some stuff in. Like, how do these things evolve in your mind and then turn into like, a character?
Well, I think when we're sort of building and developing my character on cinema, and I mean, this isn't like that. I don't mean to sound like there's 20 people in a room, like with diagrams and stuff. But as he becomes more evident of the kind of person he is, it seems natural to give him a political point of view, and of course, it's going to be something very informed by whatever Rush Limbaugh or Glenn Beck or something like that. And it's like that's just somebody online the other day was like, I didn't write back, but it was like, I don't get it. You bashed Trump on Twitter, but on cinema your character was like endorsing him. It was like this cognitive dissonance coming from I felt bad because I guess that would be confusing if you weren't paying enough attention. But It was clearly to me like the Tim Heidecker on cinema is a villain of like the highest degree. So when we, of course, he's going to be a Trump fan. Of course, he's going to believe in all these right-wing talking points of personal liberty and freedom and pro-life, unless it's my wife. All that crap and limited government and all that kind of stuff. And so that informs my character, and then it informs Decker because my character is the one writing and making that.
Right.
But the world is there for us to use as inspiration. I mean, every storyline is ripped from the headlines in some way. And the more Trump rose in prominence to the place now where he's our president, there's been just so much to draw from to incorporate into Decker because I don't think I was thinking about Trump originally, but he blended in a little bit. It was sort of a natural thing, this braggadocious, overly confident thing. And as we shot the most recent season, which is coming later this year, I started, look at how Trump raises his chin up, like after he said something, or what he does that sniff, and and then sort of that waddle he does when he's like going from one back and forth. And so there were things like we were, you pick up on, and little phrases like "during the swamp," and that kind of stuff gets kind of like melded in a little bit, where we don't want it to be this Alec Baldwin.
Right.
But it's, it's certainly informed by him because he's such a cartoon.
He's a cartoon. I mean,
ridiculous.
Yeah,
ridiculous person.
He's an avatar of ridiculousness, and it's a blessing and a curse, I'm sure, comedically. And Vic and I spoke about this a little bit because I think when Vic started like the Trump reprise, like Instagram and all that other stuff, like we were laughing about it all the time. I think Trump retweeted one time, we were like DMing each other like, this is hilarious. We were still firmly in the camp. We're like, oh well, he's obviously not going to get very far anywhere. And now you have, he's in charge. So I wanted to shift there, not to dwell on politics too much. It's something.
That's okay. I love talking.
Me too. I actually really do too. And I weirdly am someone who is very optimistic about the state of politics and just kind of our country, which I know is a hard thing to say at this point when things are objectively not great. But another part of this too is like, you started doing these you've been doing songs for a long time, and I want to get into the music stuff because it's a big part of my life too, but you started also releasing songs and then attaching them to charity, the donations and the proceeds that are going, which to me, and I wrote to Vic about this as soon as I saw you do this, I was like, this is one of the coolest things I've seen. This is like a way to feel.
But you don't think I'm really giving that money to charity?
No, I mean, but seriously, it is like a very, very, very cool thing to do because it connects these different facets of, I'm sure, that you care about in your life, which is making music, having some commentary on the things going on, but also, really providing some way to, help people. I'd be curious, like what, and I see you engage with some people on Twitter about this stuff, but like, what do you think? We have kids, right? You have kids now. I have kids. Like, what do you think is going on? What is kind of your approach? Because I know a lot of people, both creative and not, who are just consumed kind of by what's happening. And I don't think that's very productive. So I'd be curious to see like how you're dealing with it and your thoughts in general.
It's a big, hard question. I think, to go back to the election, his win, which we were shooting Decker that week, and I work with just a bunch of great liberal minded progressive artists. Right. You know what I mean? A lot of women, like half the crew are artsy, cool women, and everybody went home that night like Monday or Tuesday night, because we left the office feeling like, we've left the office kind of feeling like, it was turning at that point. Right. We had finished. It was like, I went over to my friend's house and then saw all the chips fall down. And the next morning, I came in and it was like, everybody was crying. Everybody was crying. And not everybody, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And a lot of people on this crew knew that I cared about it, and so there was just this whole fucking wave of shock and depression, and to the point where I had to make a speech, or I said a few words and just said, listen, we're here today, and I know we all feel like shit today, but we're here to make fun of this piece of shit, and that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing, and if you want to put your energy into that, it's maybe it'll help or whatever. Maybe it'll make people feel less crazy. And that was the tone, that was the vibe that I was around over those next few days. And people would come to the office, or I said to my friends, as I come to the set, because we're laughing over here. I know everyone's freaking out.
Yeah.
That feeling kind of turned into more of a anger of what do we do with this, and how do we fight this? How do we resist this? Right. And that sort of turned into, the Women's March.
Right.
And coming out of the Women's March and the airport protests and stuff was very, empowering to me and everybody I knew, because it felt like there were things you could do. There was money you could give. There was there were people fighting the good fight.
Right.
And that felt like someone asked, like, what was the point of that march?
Yeah.
I was like, it was it activated so many people. It turned so many people on to, I have people in my life that were never political, making these phone calls, and
Right.
signing petitions and donating money and all this stuff. So there was a lot of that. And now I'm starting to feel a little bit of that dip again of like, it's so overwhelming. There's so much, there's so many facets to this. I've been just like consumed with the Russia stuff.
Right.
I've read it all. I have my own feelings about it. I feel like it makes so much sense that there's this collusion, and that, the more you read about the way Putin runs his country and the way his financial ties, and you look at Donald Trump and his career and the beds he must have gotten himself into,
Right.
And the financial leveraging that he must have had to do, and the shared world views of Putin and people like Bannon.
Right.
And there's so much simpatico there. And so much, there isn't, apparently it seems like there just isn't the evidence here yet. There isn't like that. There isn't that smoking gun, and we're all just sitting around waiting for like Comey or somebody to come out and be like, okay, here, one of my friends has the theory that Comey is going to be this white knight, and there's this.
Oh, really?
There's this evident, he's been very quiet, and it's because what they're building a case, and you don't want to talk about a case until it's all there, and that takes time. But you try to read between the lines, and you hear senators talking about seeing this through and like all this stuff.
Right.
And you want this all to kind of explode into a full-blown sort of working theory for why things are the way they are.
Right.
And it's going to be, like I said the other day, I was like, all right, there's two scenarios here. One is that Donald Trump and his pals made, had a deal with the Russians last year that basically said, the Russians said, we will use our tech and our strategies for effective elections to give you a little advantage in this. Under the understanding that you are going to be friendly to us in certain
lift sanctions,
lift sanctions, be friendly, just be an easier partner to work with, and also from the Russian perspective, the last person we want there in the White House would be Hillary Clinton.
Right, hawkish, not right.
So that's one scenario, and that would be a disaster, right? Because that would mean that the president was in collusion with a foreign government to,
not good.
Adversary, right?
Yeah.
The other angle is that the establishment, the establishment, the media, the intelligence community is running a opposition to our president, to Donald Trump. They're running a campaign to discredit him and to try to remove him from office. That's a disaster too.
Yep.
If that's happening, right? So either way you look at this, it's a total failure of the American political system.
Yeah.
And it feels like, I think we already lost when he, won the Republican National, when he won the nomination of his party.
Right.
The game's been over for a little while, and part of me think. So this is the pessimistic view, is like that the sort of elite oligarchy of our country, the 1% or whatever, has determined and has felt this way for a little while, is that the American experiment has failed, is broken, is over. And everyone's grabbing what they can. It's a cash grab. And there isn't, because of very fundamental real things about what this country is about. For example, just our entitlement obligations to our baby boomer generation, or the trend towards automation, which will just wipe out a large percentage of workers. Yeah. So the billionaire class, who Donald Trump is in some ways a member of, I think they don't believe in America. They don't believe in the citizenry and the republic. They believe in their lives, like their community, their gates, and they I think they're just like a little bit a step ahead of carving out some place for themselves.
Right.
And I don't know if that's going to be physically in America or somewhere else,
New Zealand,
but
right.
But they see that this is not, they're not interested or invested in trying to repair it or save it or bring it back to some normalcy.
Right.
And those are really hard problems to solve, and they don't seem to be trying to solve them. So that's my perspective. I think Donald Trump has got to be one of the most narcissistic, self-centered, egotistical, self-consumed persons we've ever seen. So he has no interest in any of us. So I've just said a lot.
No, and it's I love that you gave both those points, because there are a lot of people who I know who are just completely willing to buy the whole Russia thing as it's presented. And I just going to the most recent Jeff Sessions thing where they kind of have a gotcha moment. I read that stuff, the form he filled out the pointed questions that Franken asked him. And it's just like, I didn't see it. I certainly believe that a lot of the circumstantial evidence points to that there is some funny business going on between Trump. And like you said, if you do the math, it certainly looks like he probably had some help. And, he just directly contradicts himself. I know Putin, I love him. He's a great guy. I never met him. So, and that's Trump. He's going to do that forever. He's in his own little delusional world where, what he says is then truth for the entire country.
He'll say whatever the person he's in the room with wants to hear.
That's right.
His motive. And that's what I always love when people come out of meetings with him going like, it was actually very nice. And he agreed with what I had to say. You often do, unless, these stories from this weekend about how angry he is. You always hear like, I think we've got some room to work with him on this. And because he's probably just saying, yes, I agree that, because he actually doesn't enjoy conflict.
No,
in a person-to-person sense.
Well, I spoke about this with Vic too. I mean, he has a hole in his heart the size of his parents, and he's going to use whatever mechanisms or tools or resources he has to fill that in every moment. So if that certainly would point to someone who doesn't want conflict, right? They're gonna be as deferential. Like the biggest proof of this when he met with Obama, during the transition. Yeah. This was the weirdest thing. You see him next to him smiling, being so deferential, and this is someone who he's savaged through the media for years. So back to what you were saying though about this whole kind of what I'll refer to as like the deep state, right? The NSA, the CIA, the mainstream media. These are not necessarily people we want fighting our battles and championing what they're doing. These organizations typically throughout history have not necessarily been part of the best decision making in the world and for the United States. And I agree with you that a lot of this stuff looks and points towards kind of a very pessimistic or dystopian perspective of what could happen. One thing that I think is clear, at least from people my age, people liberals who are older than me, progressives, and especially younger, is the one thing that makes me concerned is that the level of confusion that seems to be actively being pumped in, whether it's the Russians, whether it's, micro-targeting with Facebook ads and, Palantir and all of that stuff, it's really making it hard for people to figure out what's going on, which then can easily turn into disillusionment, which is obviously, that's not going to help, right? I mean, that's not going to, you can be disillusioned and realize that kind of the artifice of where we're living isn't what we were being told. But if that doesn't then promote some type of positive action or like, okay, how are we going to fix this? Then it becomes a serious problem. An analogy that I heard that I'm going with for now, because at the same time, while we're seeing so much of this horrible stuff in front of our faces, I've had so many amazing conversations about people who have specific plans, whether it's local community levels, big nonprofits, to actually So Tim and I got cut off real quickly, and we'll come back in a second, but I'm going to take this opportunity to let those of you who are listening in the Los Angeles area, March 18th, 2017, that's coming up, or it's in the past if you're listening to it. It already happened. It was awesome. It was great. It was the coolest thing ever. There's a MindPod Network Mindwave event in Los Angeles, March 18th. That's a Saturday, all-day affair. There's going to be live podcasting from people like Daniele Bolelli, Corey Allen from The Astral Hustle, Zach Leary from It's All Happening podcast, Yoshino, Michael Donovan from Walking Home, Michael Phillip from Third Eye Drops, and more. I will even be there. I'm going to LA, which is going to be fun. What's more, you ask? It's at 420 East 3rd Street in Los Angeles. So we didn't, the stars have aligned, and that's actually the address for where it is. Would love to see you there. If you want to find out more about what I'm talking about and get tickets, mindpodnetwork.com/mindwave. That's it. Okay, back to the episode with Tim. Bye-bye. Hey, see, break out the Alex Jones voice, because the NSA doesn't want us talking about this stuff.
Right, exactly.
But
no, you were saying it's not going to help.
Yeah, it's not going to help with the disillusionment. One metaphor that I am becoming more and more fond of in talking about this kind of brand of Trumpian faux populist kind of what we're seeing demagoguery is, I'd like to think of this kind of like a vaccine. And I'm not an anti-vaxxer, so I'd like to think that this is maybe a dose of something very nasty and bad that we're going to have a red bump on our arm for a little bit. But this maybe can provide some clarity about what to specifically prevent in the future. So I'm hoping it isn't just, an optimistic. And then the other thing, and this is my kind of like, ultra kind of woo-woo way of approaching this. I think it's an incredibly hard thing to do, but if you can get to the point, and I was talking about this with Vic and Jay Weingarten, because Jay was super pissed off about all this. He he didn't know how to be funny after the Trump thing, and our conversation was about that like nonstop. But if you can find a way to somehow have compassion or recognize that Donald Trump is a broken human being who will likely never have a real opportunity or chance to figure himself or the world at large out. Not that this compassion needs to be, oh, well, Donald Trump's a great guy, let's let him see what he's going to do. But just be like, if you can get in the mindset layer, I feel a little bad for this guy, and I hope, he does find the solace he's working to. That becomes an amazing practice or opportunity for those of us like me. One of my big issues in life is anger. I can get very angry. I can be short-tempered. And it can kind of give us something to work with out there in the world that's, while very important for the state of our country, for the global world, our children, it gives us something to work with. And I'm just, my sincere hope and concern or, aspirations with this stuff is we take a very dark situation and shine some light on it and try to say, well, this shit is going on. And the truth is if Hillary Clinton would have won, this whole layer of racism, xenophobia, misogyny, this would have still existed. So maybe by getting this stuff to the surface, we can actually take some positive steps and recognize that in the next 4, potentially 8 years, it's probably not going to get objectively better, but still do the things that we think can help. And I mean, how I want to link this up to what you're doing. I mean, when we're talking about comedy and making people laugh, I don't think there's any better thing in the world that can be done than that in these types of times. Like, that's something that loosens the shackles of fear from people, this kind of anxiety. And so I think like when we're talking, it doesn't have to be like this coordinated, like, let's form a new paradigm of a utopian society. It's just like, let's figure out the little things we can do, starting with ourselves and then extending that out into the world, whether it's making people laugh, whether it's music, whether it's arts, whether it's conversation. So like, I do think this gives us some type of, template here to approach these things in a positive way and not get overwhelmed, because like you were saying, like you feel the little dip. It's hard not to. I mean, the ride we're on, being plugged in with all of this technology, and the news, the way it comes out these days, it's like, I just remember those first 2 weeks of like, it just felt like just getting slapped in the face over and over and over again. And everyone I knew felt that, to the point where I was like, this is going to depress the workforce. Like, you know, people are going to stop doing work over these weeks because it's impossible to focus on anything besides this.
Right.
And I guess the point of this is that I think working on ourselves individually and our friends and our family and putting out stuff that we believe in the world is kind of the natural antidote to all this shit that we see. Because, you know, the other part of this, and you were alluding to it here, is like, you know, a lot of the systems that we've grown up in and have existed long before us, like another metaphor I'd use is, you know, it's like we were driving on the highway going like 65, 70, and then the engine cut out. Your car doesn't immediately stop, right? You coast along for like until you're done. You hit the brakes and then you pull over. I feel like our engine probably short-circuited like 15, 20 years ago, and now we're slowly getting to the stop. And it's kind of like we have to figure out like what car do we want to get into now? Like how are we going to make this work so like our kids can have an environment that they're proud of? And so it's just that's kind of how I'm trying to approach the situation without being foolishly idealistic too, because that's not going to help anything either. So yeah, I mean, I think it's the Chinese curse. May you live in interesting times, and we certainly are. All right, so I want to ask you a few more questions. I'm very mindful of your time here, but can we talk a little bit about music and, you know, how your relationship with music, your album in Glendale, you know, and I again, referencing the Duncan conversation you had, it's obviously got to be a little difficult for you to release projects that aren't satirical, that are more personal because of your persona, because of some of the stuff that you've been involved with. But, you know, for me, and I love listening to quality music, like you're a very talented musician, and the way you put yourself out there and the kind of music you make, it's very good. And I'd just be curious, like, who are some of your musical influences? You know, you mentioned playing in bands, but how does music fit into like the cosmology of your life?
Right. Well, I mean, I'm a Beatles guy. I'm a classic rock guy, you know, from way back when. I like, you know, folk and tunes. I like, you know, I like the band, and I'm a big Dylan fan, and you know, I mean, these are all surface people, but sort of also the kind of music that stems out of that genre. Randy Newman and Warren Zevon and these kind of people. That's I don't know. I like simple. You know, I'm not a prog rock guy really.
Right.
I'm not a techno, you know, electronica music kind of guy. I like warm, earthy, guitar-based music. Generally. That just makes me, I mean, I get a little sick of it sometimes, and I have to listen to jazz or classical music or something like that. And I like that stuff too. I like a broad range of music, but I mean, I'm not the most skilled musician, so when I write music, I tend to write music with 3 or 4 chords in it, you know. I'm not trying to reinvent song structure or
no sus9 diminished chords, right? Yeah.
Well, I do a little bit of the jazzy chords. You know,
all right, cool.
Holmes got the ninth in it and stuff. So there's like 3 or 4 chords that Davin showed me that are, you know, that are helpful when you're trying to make something that doesn't sound like twist and shout, you know?
Yeah. You're talking about Davin Wood too, right?
Yeah. So, so I've always just loved music, and I've loved, almost as a hobby, trying to do, you know, learning how to record at home, learning how to, you know, get a decent quality sound going. And that's been sort of like a hobby. It's like, you know, I go to the basement and buy a bunch of plugins and learn about some EQs and mess around with it. And I'm very limited in that. So I'm lucky to also know people that are much better at it and then can come in. But I think I have a good grasp on, or a natural talent to write songs or write melodies. And some of it is work, and some of it is you just pops into your head and you write it down, and it takes you about the length of the song to write it, you know?
Yeah. Well,
so
no, and I wanted to say, going to a music school and knowing a lot of people who play music and people who don't play music, and I think there's this misconception that you need to be extremely technically proficient to make good or great music. And I'm of the opinion that whatever the art is, whether it's comedy, whether it's a painting, whether it's music, what's actually being communicated in that art is the entire process itself. It's not just the end finished piece. So everything that goes into it is a part of what's being communicated. So that means the frustrations, the
Right.
glee, whatever. And that's why when I say like you're a really great musician, is that comes through in everything you do. And it's just, it really does connect with people who are listening to that. A book, I'll give you a book recommendation. I also, this is my next question is, what stuff do you like to read? But a book you may dig, it's a little esoteric and a little old, but it's called The Mysticism of Sound and Music by a guy named Hazrat Inayat Khan. He was a Sufi mystic, and he has very, very interesting kind of theories and principles about how sound and music affects, not only our, emotions and our ears, but also like, down to the physical. He was talking about like string theory and quantum physics stuff well before any of this stuff came out. He's long since passed, but you may dig it. So I divulged my next question there. What's are you a reader? Do you like to read stuff?
I go through
Phases, yeah, I'm sure.
Phases, and it's a little hard with kids. And, I just like I read a lot of articles and newspapers, magazines and stuff, and I love biographies. I read a lot of historical books and biographies about historical figures.
Cool.
And I haven't really picked up a novel in a while.
Yeah.
I feel like I don't know. It feels, I can't recall the last one I read, but I also have such a bad memory of like what I've read. And, like, I don't know. I'll go through phases. I'll like pick up the Tom Petty biography and read, and read that in a week and like do nothing but read that book. And I was like, well, I don't know if I needed to read that. It was good, but so there's books that are really fun and easy to read, and then there's more, books that take more of your energy and time that aren't so fun, but you feel better after reading them.
Yeah, I mean that's.
I would say like a lot of my world view and humor and everything has been dictated by Kurt Vonnegut, reading his books.
Oh God, I know, it's one of my God, he's so great.
Woody Allen's books, if you've read those.
I haven't.
They're just collections of his stories and his articles and stuff. Very informative.
I haven't read those.
Oh yeah, Without Feathers and Life Itself. I think they're really, really, really fun.
Awesome.
Like another sense of another kind of his humor that I don't think is in his movies so much.
Cool. All right, I'm gonna ask a few more questions, and I'm gonna let you go.
Okay.
So I wanted to talk about our mutual friend Vic Berger, and if you could just, you a long time ago, back when he had like 10 followers, retweeted something, and then I got to know him and have been an avid fan and friend since. Can you just talk about how? He's a genius. How are we lucky enough?
I don't know about genius.
Yeah. I'm
not like David Bowie or
no. But in his own right, he is now transcending. I hear, like my parents' friends talking to me about Vic Berger now. He's clearly, transcended his little kind of niche as like a funny video maker with the politics and stuff. But like, what initially did you see? I know he was making songs for On Cinema and he sent you some stuff, but like, what did you see in Vic that, clearly, launched a star? Like, what was it in him that?
Well, I guess I saw early. Yes, we gave him some early assignments to do stuff for On Cinema because he had made these, and I thought the songs were good. Like they're catchy songs about Ayaka and world, On Cinema world that were above and beyond the quality that they needed to be. Or it was just like, there was that. There was, and then there was the fact that he was from my hometown, which I thought was kind of neat because I don't know a lot of people from my hometown that come out doing interesting things. So it was notable, it was notable for me that he was from my hometown.
That's cool.
And I guess I can't remember like some of the very first videos he was making. They were like recuts of, I know there was a Emerald Lagasse one, but
oh my God, yes.
There were other ones that I can't remember right now what they were, but they were just, him recutting weird things that he found on the internet. There was like one of Tom Hanks from interview he did. Yeah. There's just these weird and some chubby checker stuff.
Oh God, yeah.
But there was some very, very early things that he was playing around with. And I guess that's what he was doing, just playing around. I must have encouraged him to make something. But I remember seeing them and being like, okay, this is something that's informed by our stuff, but is now going in a different direction, or it's elevating it, or he's got his own. He's got some of his own tricks here that are not just copying.
Right, it's not like derivative. It's his own stuff.
Not derivative.
Yeah.
And I showed it to some people, some friends, and I was sharing it with some friends, and everybody was laughing the way I was laughing. So I just kept encouraging him, and said, he would send me cuts to look at, and I was able, I was happy to give him my 2 cents, and it's been great because I was, Bob Odenkirk was so generous with his time and his mind and everything. To us, I always felt like if I was ever in any kind of position to be that for somebody else, if it felt warranted, it felt like genuine, I would be so happy to be that person because, I have some experience and some opinions and some contacts and some, I have some people following what I say. So if I could do that for somebody, it would be great. And, Dick's really taken it and run with it.
Yeah, man. Well, I am so happy that you did because he's, outside of being immensely talented, again, like the common theme of people who seem to know you personally, like one of the nicest people I've come across, like ever. Just like a genuinely, he's a mensch. He's just a really good guy. So
that's nice.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, I got 3 quick rapid fire questions and then one at the end, and then we're done. And I just want to say thank you again because this is really, it's a treat for me.
You're welcome.
Thanks. Yeah. Okay. So what is your favorite color?
Do not have one, but I've been wearing a black T-shirt now consistently, pretty much every day for almost a year now.
Oh wow! Okay.
My new like Steve Jobs move.
Cool, man.
I've got this black Calvin Klein T-shirt that I like the way it fits me, and I don't need to think about what I'm putting on every morning.
I think there are advantages to just developing a uniform, at a certain point. It just seems to work. Yeah. So I hear you on that. Exactly. What's your favorite number?
Well, I don't have a favorite number. And I don't, and it's well established on my own podcast that I do not like favorites.
So what is a number you enjoy, not a favorite?
I don't know, man. I don't want to bullshit you here.
You don't have to bullshit me. There's no number that's fine. And if there's not one, I don't have to pin you down.
I'm also not a numbers guy. I mean, numbers just confuse me in general.
I hear you. Well, I bring them up. The reason I ask these questions is I'm a big Carl Jung fan, and one of his disciples had the theory that numbers are the primordial archetype. So before we get into anything else, number is actually the structure of everything that we perceive. So which is why I ask it. Some people see numbers pop up. Some people do not. So I'm going to change the third question. What's an animal you enjoy?
What's an animal I enjoy sexually?
Any animal in any way you enjoy.
I like going to the zoo and looking at the great apes, the gorillas,
Yes, I do. I very much do. All right, and last question. What's a practical tip you could share with people listening that has helped you in your life?
Well, be if you can be super artistic and creative and weird and be a weirdo and stuff, but you have to take the way you present yourself or the way you present your work seriously and respectful of the person you're presenting it to. So and make it clear about what it is and what it's intending to be. So if you think you want to make funny skits, do them, see them as well as you can, see them through as well as you can. Present them cleanly and clearly with labels and you know what I mean? Like, don't just, we've always had people that just hand us like a blank DVD with like their name scrawled on it, like, this is it, it sucks,
That's not.
You look at the earliest things Eric and I put out. They were like this nice cover with like a logo and our information on the back, and it's like very well packaged.
Well, you're being respectful of the people you're potentially trying to get something you care about in front of their faces. So that makes a lot of sense. Tim, man, thank you so much for doing this. I really had a great time. I'll email you if there's anything specifically you want me to put out there. You have my everlasting support in any capacity, man. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Noam. Nice talking to you.
Nice talking to you too.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye. Big thanks to Tim for coming on and doing this. Super cool. Thank you for listening. If you like Synchronicity, if you like this conversation, go back and listen to some other ones. Tell your friends. Rating, reviewing on iTunes, that would be cool. You don't have to do it. If you'd like to donate, like some of the very awesome people who have chosen to do that, super appreciated. This is a very good time. If you're ever considering donating to the show, this would be it. No obligation, though. That's it. I will see you guys next week.